I'm Josh. I am by day a UX researcher and a creative technologist. For the purpose of this talk, completely a layperson, not on a community board, not an elected official, not working for the government in any way. Just somebody with a problem. With a problem on my street that I've been trying to solve for a few years, and something I'm doggedly determined to fund creative workarounds for.
And I'm Roisin. I'm Josh's neighbor. And by day, I've worked in nonprofit operations for most of the past 20 years or so. And my work here is just born out of seeing a need in my community and hearing folks have a need. And we'll get into it more. But really, I just enjoy making the community somewhere that's more livable for ourselves and our kids and whatnot. And I'm also very involved in the tree planting, which will be next month. We plant anywhere from like 3 to 12 trees a year in the neighborhood and coordinate it. And that's just something else in the neighborhood. So thank you all for joining us.
Yeah. So we live in Dippers Park. Both live near the street on Dorchester Road. Looks pretty sedate in this photo, pretty calm. That's because I took it like shortly after sunrise, some like sunny Sunday morning. But the street usually looks a whole lot more like this, which might be a familiar problem I imagine to folks here, since this probably what brought some of you into the room. Yeah, Roisin, do you want to talk a little bit about this photo and that you took?
Sure, yeah. We'll get into it more, but just some features about this intersection with this slightly sped up video to note are the visibility that you can see. The angle of oncoming traffic is a little bit difficult to see, as well as some of the things around it. Like there's a senior center right here, two schools, U3K centers, etc.
Yeah. And to like double click on that a little bit, so the street that we are on is this like east-west street that kind of cuts through central Brooklyn. It's a really convenient shortcut for folks, coming east to west. It is really wide, has very few traffic controls, and it cuts it at just this perfectly frustrating angle that makes it very impossible for drivers to see oncoming traffic as they're inching out from these kind of secondary north-south routes, which is a pretty big problem for us as we're trying to, live here across the street. Problem for drivers getting into accidents. A problem for everyone because it's like, buffeted by streets in either direction that have many more traffic controls, can be slower to travel on. So it's just like this great shortcut for folks, but it's sort of at our expense a little bit.
And another feature you'll notice is that it's pretty wide, considering it's a one-way street, and the absolute absence of any lane markings that delineate where cars should be, where any bikes should be, and where the parked cars should be. They were there in 2011, they repaved, and they haven't ever put the markings back in over the decade since.
Yeah. So all that makes us feel very sad. Not huge fans of the state of this experience. And yeah.
In describing this problem and kind of coalescing the community around trying to address it, our friend Liz, who's one of the co-chairs and really driving forces behind Flatbush Streets for People, which is a subgroup of transportation alternatives, which is active in our part of Brooklyn, she refers to it as the missing stair. Has anyone heard that phrase? She's the first person I heard say it, and it's really relevant here. A missing stair is a missing stair that you, as the person who lives there, knows to avoid. But someone else would come into your house and just absolutely faceplant on that or worse. And everyone knows to not drive down these particular streets if they can avoid it. But because so many of them are one-ways, it's really hard to avoid if you have particular needs for school or work or where you live. So it's definitely the missing stair in our community and something everyone's aware of, but that still exists.
Yeah. So it's like, it's all fine if you kind of like live here, kind of know the rules. Again, I'm sure folks here have like, imagining kind of their own blocks that kind of work like this. It's not, it's not really that unique in the city, especially in the outer boroughs. But Yeah, all fun and games till somebody gets hurt or worse, which is why it's a big priority for us to try to make it a little bit better. So I grew up in the neighborhood. I moved back about 4 years ago. Moved onto the street, and it was the first thing that I noticed. So right away, I wrote to the DOT to request an always stop sign at that corner. Anybody can do this. I've never done it before. I encourage you to pop onto the DOT's site and go through that process. And if you do go through that process, even one person can make a difference. Even one person can trigger a traffic study being requested. So it was a really good place to start. I've done it successfully in the past at other intersections and thought it would kind of be a no-brainer here. But obviously, 4 years later, we're here talking about it, so not quite a no-brainer. And a few blocks down, you were trying to do the same thing, although we didn't know each other then.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew some of your family members from the neighborhood, but hadn't yet met Josh. And my motivation for doing it was just having a couple of dear misses and just hearing from folks that it was just really something that had to be done, and just finding out a little bit through the community boards how to go about it. So I wanted my kids to be able to cross the street to get to their grandparents' house and without fearing for their life or running or worse.
Yeah. Sadly, not so simple. This is a response that I got to the study that I requested. So a study was run, which is great. But the DOT, as you can see, said traffic conditions did not meet nationally recognized traffic engineering safety standards required for installation of a traffic control. And that was the end of the conversation as far as they were concerned. That was the last that I heard from them. But yeah, we're a little pushy in our own ways. So both of us, with our own respective stop signs, have really not accepted no as an answer.
And we tried different approaches. If they weren't going to try stop signs, something had to be done to slow down the traffic, which by their own report was about 38 miles an hour in this 25 zone. So we requested speed bumps, bike lanes, and all of these requests were either kicked down the road or promised and not implemented or not implemented.
Yeah. I even went so far to give a talk on this topic last year at Google Dinvest, my second time here. This is not a repeat of that talk, and I recommend that check it out online so it gets into some of the technical details a little bit more. But yeah, that was trying creative things to get attention and kind of push on this problem a little bit. With my intersection, again, we live 3 blocks away and are trying to do the same thing at these two different corners on that one street. But I realized I needed to learn a little bit more about the traffic study that had been run. And I wound up using New York Freedom of Information law to get a copy of the traffic study, since, again, I hasn't turned back from the DOT and had no real other way to figure out what was going on. And again, this is something anybody can do. We did this together for Roisin's intersection last summer. Takes a few months. You have to write up a little request about what you're looking for. But then they sent me a fancy PDF, which was filled with all sorts of inscrutable diagrams with no explanation, that I spent a few months trying to make sense of, like this one, and this one, and this Excel sheet, all of these, which all involve drilling down into mapping the street and mapping the distance between other traffic controls that exist and the height of buildings. This is, the number of cars and pedestrians that are passing in a given 60-minute period. The number of windows of time in a 60-minute period that are considered long enough for a pedestrian to cross the street, like the number of gaps. This is a gap analysis between cars. None of these are things I knew anything about. And again, this came with no instruction. So really, I kind of, dug through with as many resources as I could, looking through PDF templates designed by the DOT for traffic engineers that I happened to come across, popping those into ChatGPT to help me with the calculations and make sense of the gap analysis.
And I'll just jump in here. And you also really focused on leaning into the MUTCD, which the Department of Transportation site. Does anyone know what that is? That's what they consider like their Bible in street design, and which they will cite as often, assuming that you don't know about it. So kind of holding it as like, well, I'm sure you don't know about that. And Josh, you'll see later, was like, I actually do, and here's what they say versus what we've identified. So really, I think, give yourself more credit, like looked at what they got and then really cross-referenced it with the national standards so that you could hold it to account a little more.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because the numbers didn't stand up to scrutiny. So this is the, what I kind of learned about this process. This sheet is sort of the holy grail. This is the like multi-factor analysis. So there is different traffic warrants. They're hauled. Basically different arguments that you can make for getting a traffic or at a given intersection. So things like how many gaps there are in a given period for pedestrians to cross, how many crashes there have been in like a 12 or 36 month period, how many of those crashes were considered, avoidable. What is the volume of cars on major roads versus like secondary or tertiary roads? All of these kind of like factor into whether or not you get a traffic signal. Or any kind of traffic control or calming measure. And really, I just wanted to see whether that data, held water. Like, were they right? Because what we were seeing with our own eyes didn't match, what the data was saying.
Whereas if I had gotten this, I think I initially, before we started working together, would have been a little bit more trusting of the data, which is really what their intention, I think, is to say, well, they're using federal guidelines. This really does need to be equitable so that you don't just have traffic signals at the places that are the squeakiest wheel, but really the ones that meet federal guidelines. Like that data methodology sounded just and fair and useful to me and equitable to me that the Department of Transportation is saying that they were using. I would have seen these and probably wouldn't have dug into it. This is not intended to be user-friendly. There's not an invitation here to have me, and I don't have the methods or the capacity to measure speed. I can certainly count individuals, but that's where I think you've influenced me in looking at this with a more critical eye than I probably would have in the past.
Yeah. My process, which I'll talk a little bit more about and went into in my talk last year in a little more detail, we're basically going as far as taking my own videos of the intersection that I want an all-way stop at and developing a custom car counting script, which I'll dig into in a little bit. But basically, is a Python script with a few open source libraries that are designed for tracking, identifying objects, defining them, and tracking them through space as a way of running basically my own homebrew DIY traffic study, and seeing what the data matched with what the DOT was giving us, which, spoiler alert, it absolutely did not.
And you all might have understood that exactly as Josh said it, but my response to that is what? Because this is great, but just something that would just be beyond my personal ability to create. And I think that it set us up in the next step, which was checking out to see if what they were providing to us was in fact the useful, correct data.
Yeah. I'll dive into that a little bit more, but worth noting, we still don't have our stop signs, the two that we're most passionate about. Although we've had some other wins that we'll talk about. I mentioned this when I gave the talk that I gave last year to be like, it was kind of at the end of the talk that I was like, well, by the way, didn't succeed. Story doesn't have the easiest, happiest ending since we're still working on it. So I just want to bring that up in the conversation in case anybody wants to bail now. Feel free to do so. It won't hurt my feelings. But in some ways it's worse, right? Because we don't have our stop signs, and yet there's been a lot of interaction with the DOT, and a lot of the creative things that we have done we've gotten some traction. So one example was like, I went back to Google Maps images from over 10 years ago and found like lane narrowing striping. So paint that narrows the lane, that at some point the road had been repaved and like the lanes had been, the markings had not been added back. So we got the DOT, because I presented that data, to commit to putting those like lane buffers back in. That never happened. There were a bunch of other things that they promised, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, in 2022, they presented to our community board, 14 in Brooklyn, that a shared bike lane was coming in 2023. 2023, they really used the same PDF and said it was coming in 2024. We're in 2025, and we're told it's happening this spring. We've been arguing and fighting for a protected bike lane. It's like, if you're going to be, let's maybe use the delay to an advantage to actually protect folks, but that's still not in. Vague references to enhanced crossings have been made for it. And we've seen at the same time that it's not a total standstill. We have seen traffic signals go in other spots in other neighborhoods for it. So it's not like no progress has been made across the board. For some reason, we haven't seen any though.
Yeah, we're getting literal. So we wanted to really know why. And the answer really comes back to this slide. I was looking at this again this morning, and I was like, the answer is really here. There's a lot of like subtext hidden here, but I really hadn't noticed over the years that I've been looking at this, really until this morning. I don't know if any of you can find it, but it's right there. Judgment. It's not that the traffic conditions don't meet nationally recognized traffic engineering safety standards required for installation of the traffic control. It is that our judgment says that is not the case. So that's a loophole big enough to drive a Mack truck through. Which, yeah, I see too many of those 53-foot trucks on Dorchester. Yeah, so the big thesis, backing up a step, the big learning, that's why I wanted to come here today, is that the data itself is nice, but it's not enough, it turns out. It just, it's necessary but insufficient. It just isn't enough to get the job done, or we would have our stop signs by now and then some. And there's so many examples of this. The city is littered with them. Folks here followed, Ashland Place, the bike lane that is this major, cross route that connects Fort Greene to Park Slope and Prospect Heights, and then just ends abruptly because BAM and the developers of One Hanson or whatever that tower is successfully lobbied, and so they just gave up on the bike lane that they had promised. Or near where we live, the DOT has brought out the podium and given talks here at the intersection of Church and Ocean Parkway, the entrance of the Prospect Expressway, which again, plenty of data supporting dealing with this problem. Gigantic trucks turning, cars coming from every direction, huge history of accidents, and yet nothing, no action. Or of course the BQE, infinite data. This is stymied mayors, multiple administrations who have tried to deal with this problem, and I don't know if they're just waiting for the whole thing to fall apart before they do anything. So the data isn't enough, right? And then there's the fact that that sometimes the data, the data that kind of becomes considered the truth. It becomes the gold standard. That traffic study I showed you, that's there. That happened in July of 2021. Those are the facts, right? That's the data. But as we saw from the kind of homebrew study that I ran, that was totally wrong. The data really didn't match reality in very finite, definable ways. And we want to talk about that for a second because there are a lot of ways that the data that exists, misses out on reality. This is a photo I took, again, a few summers ago, a crash at my corner. This is a man putting his bumper back in his trunk after the accident, or after the crash. Crash that was unreported. Cops were never called. They never came. It never made it into a portal. It's not anything you could query in a SQL database.
It never happened, despite the physical evidence. So digging into the discrepancy of the data. So you saw how Josh foiled the actual data study from the using the Freedom of Information law. In that, it said that there had been 2 crashes in 36 months. Josh also went through and looked at actual crashes and was able to document 5 using open source data from the Department of Motor Vehicles. And that's, again, the ones that were reported, whereas ones like this just weren't. We also learned that it could be that the street name was spelled incorrectly. The streets on this stretch are Westminster, Rugby, Argyle, Marlborough, Stratford, and folks will often do, Westminster, Marlborough spelled a certain number of ways, and that wouldn't come up in a basic search. So Josh was also using the GPS coordinates and really taking it. And when we saw, hey, we've met the warrants, we've met some of the 5 warrants that you require to take action on this, we were excited about that, but it still hasn't been enough. Even with a severe injury, happening that also was not something they were taking into account. So crashes need to have an MV-104 filed or it didn't happen. But the problem there is that that's the file that the police used to do when they would report to the scene of a crash. Since April 2020, NYPD is only coming if there's if a crash has a KSA related to it. Does anyone know what that means? Someone's killed or seriously injured. And what you see here, luckily no one was killed. No one was seriously injured. There was just a major collision in an uncontrolled intersection, and that's not good enough for the police to come to do it. So had this man taken the step, go online, get an MV-104 form, which is very long and complicated, fill it out and submit it, then it would have been counted. But in this case, he did not. And let's just be frank about it. There's many reasons why people don't want to report a crash, and either one party or both parties. We get into that a little bit later. So coming back to the traffic studies.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to pause on this slide because that was a photo that I took. This is a photo that you took at Georgia Tech. You want to share the context of this?
Sure, yeah. Because of police no longer responding unless someone dies or is leaving bleeding in the ambulance, we're seeing this. So on this stretch of road, and when we talk about our stop signs, we're really both advocating for both of them because they're really part of one thing. So this is a driver who we didn't know. I've since gotten to know this person, but hey, I was hit by a car. Do you have footage of it? I really need it. Contacted this person. Yes, I have a neighbor. I got that person the camera footage. There it is, footage of the crash. She was hit by a limo. There was damage. But you probably guess where I'm going with this. It's not in the list of files because the police did not come. They were called. They did not respond. The other driver left. She ended up paying for all the damages herself, even though she was hit by a limo as a result of this uncontrolled intersection.
Yep. So again, the NYPD crash list in the open data portal just has this is just a ghost incident. Did not ever happen.
And I contacted the precinct council, and they were, they have their policy, which is when to respond or not, and they didn't.
So, So there's some bad news. We've kind of gone through some of that, but I do think there is a silver lining. Unsafe streets can feel very permanent, and then one day they're not. One day they get fixed. And there are as many examples of those that I can share as there are of the counterexample. So I love this photo of Washington Square Park when it was used in the 60s as a parking lot. It's very, very different than how the space is used today. Much like, Prospect Park and Central Park that no longer have cars running through them. Or folks in Williamsburg who spent some time looking at Berry Street, it's basically a car-free paradise now. It was, again, never true until one day it was. Or this is, further out of town, but I think a lot about the work in San Francisco to turn the Great Highway into a linear park. So it was closed temporarily during the early days of COVID. And then as of recently, that's been enshrined into law, and that is, was officially closed to traffic permanently. And so this is kind of thinking about all of this, really thinking about what these examples have in common. And it brought me back to soil and grain. It's just people. It's people. It's all people. The data itself, again, is just not, is not the answer. Is not good enough. When I gave my talk last year, this was really the epilogue that I didn't quite make time for, which is, is kind of why we're back today. We were putting some of this stuff together, and Regine said, I don't think there's enough data in the talk. And I was like, well, that's kind of exactly the point, of what we're talking about here. Data is great, but as we've seen, it just doesn't get the job done by itself. But we are starting to learn what does get the job done. So last year, as a result of some notoriety that I got around the car counting script I mentioned before, that got me here last year to give this talk. I also, as a result of that, received this email from Brian Grady, who works for our council person. I was invited to join a neighborhood walkabout after the talk that I gave last year, organized by a few of my neighbors who, unbeknownst to me, were working on this problem in parallel, like Regine. That is where we met for the first time. And full credit to our council member, Rita Joseph, who coordinated this meeting. She's also in this photo, along with our DOT, our Brooklyn DOT Commissioner Keith Bray, they came to see these problematic hotspots in the neighborhood, and yeah, this is us. This is the full group. I wonder, Roisin, if you want to talk a little bit about everybody in this group, because it's a really interesting and unusual mix of people that were brought together that day. And Roisin, like I just want to call out, like everybody, like this is like a skill set that I don't fully have, but you really are like the glue that brings a lot of these people together, and you really put in the hours, which we'll talk about more. But yeah, but as a result, I know you have much longer experience with all of these people than I do, and I wonder if you can talk about who those folks are.
Yeah, well, our councilperson, Rita Joseph from the 40th Council District is next to me, second from the left in the photo. Liz, we mentioned, who started Flopper Streets for People, Jill, Josh, Eric, and then two folks from the DOT, the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner, and then the Director of Constituent Affairs, whose names I know, but who I share. All joined the talk, did the walkthrough, and Councilperson Joseph put it together to really bring them to her district to see some of the things that many folks had been talking about. And
yeah, it's an interesting coalition. Yeah, like I was saying, that without these people, like none of the data would have been enough. Nothing that I've done would have ever been seen by anybody. Keith Bray is holding the manila envelope that has like my DIY traffic study that I gave him. But like getting that document into his hands would never have happened, without folks in the neighborhood who were actually, putting this work in with each other and like making this stuff happen.
And one of those people we'll highlight is Eric, second from left, whose work led to the intersection where we're at now. It has led to some of the big wins in the neighborhood. Okay. This is Eric's work. This is a passion project of Eric looking at this intersection. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but this is really how it was being used. And it was a lot of people's advocacy. Definitely give credit to our community board. But he was like kind of the guy who I always thought of when I thought of this intersection. And he was on the talk, and what he proposed may have seemed wild when it's actually similar to what was enacted. And when we arrived at that intersection, an unnamed person at the DOT who was with us said, "Gosh, I always get so many complaints about this intersection." And we, those of us from the community attending were kind of like, there's a reason for that. Nobody is taking all of these steps to contact you just because they have time or they are, just free. So this is what Josh proposed, and then this is
Eric. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Well, Eric, who was previously Eric Jenkins in the previous photo, and then this is what the DOT proposed for us. So it's a little hard to follow, but it's actually not dissimilar to what Eric was advocating for.
Yeah, and basically this slide is actually the current state, the maximum carnage state that was current when he was advocating for it. That shows. If you're not familiar with this, like dogleg intersection, basically imagine cars trying to go straight across Cordelia Road would be, creating a really, really problematic situation for pedestrians that are trying to cross there. And that was, sort of the state for many years until just this past fall.
And this is Eric's work.
And Eric, yeah, and again, the reason I, want to emphasize that is because Eric showed up. He showed up at all of these spaces. He took the time to create the Google Slides. Didn't look that pretty, right? But it got the job done. He had the color printouts that he would give to everybody. He would put up the signs with the QR codes on every traffic post near the intersection, so that if you were having a problem yourself, you would know you weren't alone, and there were other people that you could get in with. And then, as a consequence, like here we were with a traffic an engineer at the DOT actually coming up with this solution that is in place today. Again, very similar to what Eric was trying to accomplish. That would have been considered like really dramatic, preventing basically what Eric wanted to do was make it so you could not go straight on Cordelia Road. You had to make a right turn. So it was like severing this major artery. Kind of crazy solution like that. It's a big intersection. Nobody would do that. But that is, in fact, exactly how it works today as a result of what Eric has done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there
are a couple of other intersections just to talk about. mentioned that we've, the ones that we're perhaps most passionate about, we have not yet had success with, but we've just heard as in the past couple of weeks, this is Regina's text, our little group, that we are getting a traffic signal put in on Dorchester Road, a couple blocks down from the hotspots that we're interested in. So we are chipping away at this problem one little bit at a time. And then as a result of this talk, really, the fact that we're giving this talk, do you want to actually talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I gave a preview that we were, hey, remember this email chain from the past 3 years? We're going to be giving a talk at New York City Open Data Week. Is there anything that we can present? I want to make sure that we have the latest info. That spurred a conversation with Department of Transportation and folks. We're going to talk about like a petition that we have, which over 500 signatures on it. And as a result of us saying that we will be talking here, they mentioned again the possibility of having an enhanced crosswalk. Do any of you know that traffic solution, an enhanced crosswalk? So that's something that they propose when there's a couple of needs met, that you have essentially a pedestrian spot to cross between two traffic signals that are existing. So basically putting a zebra line out where there's an existing shortcut across the road, even if there's not a traffic sign. So this is another intersection. This is showing what it would look like, a zebra stripe, essentially with no traffic calming. Yeah. For our particular topography, I think it's a worse solution than a better one, because it creates a false sense of safety, that maybe people approaching it would say, oh, there's a zebra line, that traffic's going to stop, and they are very much not going to stop. And this road that is shown is a little bit narrower, so old folks going to the senior center or the pre-K kids going to their center would have to really run across ours because of the sight lines.
But to be clear, there's a terrible solution here, which is why we also fought for years and got this turned into a traffic signal. So this is an older photo, but it shows, what that method looks like. Basically, it looks like a crosswalk, but nobody realizes there actually isn't a stop sign, which is terrible for everyone. But it's an example of a win because it, as a result of what we're doing, the fact that we're talking about this, like they are paying attention. They're a little worried maybe about some not so great PR. They're like in the mix, in the conversation with us, which is really like the most important thing. So we want to talk a little bit about like what we think of as the recipe for success. It is qualified success. Maybe progress is like the better word, since we are obviously still chiseling away at this. But one thing that I really hope folks kind of take away from the conversation is to start thinking about yourself more as a data producer rather than just a consumer of the data sets that are available. Like, there's bad data out there. It's not necessarily there because it was the gold standard. It's just there because somebody put it there and then it became fact, right? But like, you can influence that in many ways. So sometimes that means running the numbers, by yourself. So that was like the purpose of my traffic study, which I brought my little speed gun that I bought. So if anybody wants to run down the hallway and see how fast you go, we can do that. But right. Sometimes that means, preparing for a data duel like we have coming up, by gathering the numbers yourself and making sure that like you actually have the facts and they're behind you. That can be like a very technical thing. These are a couple of my slides from my presentation last year that speak to the technical background behind the car tracking code that I put together, which used some computer vision software called EOLO and supervision. I won't get into the script, that's all from last year. I just want to kind of give a nod to it since this is a data conference. But that's a little to the side of this talk. But it doesn't always have to be technical, right? Like that's the real point. Sometimes it's just about like creating opportunities for folks around you to contribute to the conversation at the right moments. You want to share a little bit about?
Yeah, sure.
So learn about DOT.
Sure. So we had a town hall that was put together by our councilperson Rita Joseph, and when folks got up and complained about this stretch of road, which is notorious, the missing stair, we asked, why are we seeing things in other neighborhood? And we were told because they asked for it, which was interesting because we were all taking time on a weeknight to go to this town hall to do that very thing. Another another message that came from that Department of Transportation town hall is Department of Transportation is a complaint-driven organization. So that to us really informed some of our tactics, which is to keep the pressure on, and that the complaints do go somewhere and they are counted. And every time there is someone who says, "Hey, I just moved here, and has anyone else noticed this?" or I had this close call, we tell them exactly what to do. So I've shared some of the things that we're doing and given them the actual link to our change.org petition, to fixdorchester.com, where which we'll get into, and things that they can actually do to address this.
Yeah. And so, you're there kind of every time. I mean, every time that there's a crash in the middle of the night, you're running down the street to see if they're like, is this going to be documented? First, is everyone okay? First and most important, let's be clear. But after that, is this going to be documented? Do we have, can we, assuming everyone's okay, can we use this to kind of make the case?
I've gotten 3 such messages in the last 4 months. Hey, there's been a crash. Come check it out. And I go down and talk. And the most recent one, it was a e-bike and a car had collided in the intersection due to the lack of the stop sign. And I went down and read the room and decided that the gentleman on the e-bike who was doing a delivery might have had reasons that he wouldn't want to contact the authorities about the crash he'd been in, and just said, "Get home safe, have a good night." And there's many reasons he said that people might not want to be officially counted, but just they haven't been. And that's really tough, because you see that that's like kind of the missing link, but know that, people's own safety needs to come first.
Right. But if they want to and don't know how, then
we provide that.
We give them a resource to do that. And that comes up, right? So anytime anybody in the neighborhood Facebook group is, has a near miss or observes the problem and brings this up, sometimes thinking they're the first ones to say it, that's another opportunity, another moment to capitalize on that momentum and that very reasonable anger that comes up. But it really only works when you've created something for folks to do with that feeling. So, Roisin created this change.org petition, which currently has over 500 responses. So that's one place that we kind of put a lot of that energy when it comes in. You also brought me and a couple of other people together to create this site, fixdorchester.com, which is, just a pretty simple WordPress site that socializes, some of the info. I added a plugin that basically sends a targeted complaint directly to the DOT with the option of using generative AI to help shape the message. But the idea there is that if you actually do go through this process of going to try to make a complaint to the commissioner, you go through a lot of nested drop downs, and a lot of pop-ups come up and a lot of warnings, because they really want fewer complaints. We want more. We want a lot more.
Have any of you, go ahead.
How often do you have people who are calling elected offices and complaining, not putting in typed forms, not going through a website, but actually making calls? I say this as someone on the government
side of it.
Let's talk after.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'd say often, and we don't have access to that data, because that would be but they have said that this stretch of road is their top concern. It's been year after year, and they're fully on board.
Approximate volume of how many people are calling offices about this
No.
each week?
What's the question or the hypothesis underlying the question?
Let's talk after.
Because I want to capture that.
I just said the phone complaints work, talking to a real person. But let's talk more after you.
Okay. And just to, as the non-tech person in our presentation, this was so neat what Josh made, because really in 2 minutes, you can just put in your own name, address, email, and phone, so that you are the human on the other side of it. And as we were saying, we're really looking for a stretch of road here that's so treacherous. So choose one of the intersections and put it through. Because how many of you have used the DOT's portal to put in a complaint on anything?
Yeah.
There's a lot of options to choose from. And as they are tracking it, if you request a traffic signal or a traffic sign or traffic calming or a speed bump, 4 of you could put in the request and you're not getting any volume, because you've each put in a separate request in a separate silo. So by doing this, Josh has really enabled people to make all of the right drop-down choices. And so that it goes. And we got our it's time warming, so we're going to speed it up a bit.
We're pretty much near the end, but but we've done a couple of other things. We were trying around Halloween, try some other creative approaches, like a bit of like kind of sticker bombing with QR codes, so that on the theory that Halloween, a moment for a lot of pedestrians, might have a lot of issues with the status quo, might be a good opportunity to kind of correct some of that. Bit experimental, not as successful as we thought, but I literally put a big TV in my window with access to the QR code to try to capture that momentum when it's there, because that's really a big part of the job, just like taking advantage of that, harnessing that feeling that's already present.
And when there are close calls, when a neighborhood kid almost got hit on her way to elementary school 2 months ago, etc., we have these ready to go so that people have a actual tangible, rather than just complaining to each other, actual thing to put it through so that it will be counted in their data.
So that's us. You probably don't live on our block, but where you live, you might want to know things that you can do. Calling your elected officials, probably one of the things on that list. But to be added, this is, even though there are some issues with the form, you should definitely hop online and fill out the form, go through the drop downs, because even one person can trigger a traffic study. In fact, if you are requesting a stop sign, unless there's been one done recently in the past 12 months or so, one person is enough to trigger a full-on traffic study at an intersection. So just being one person is very, very powerful. Really showing up and continuing to show up is really important, right? Like, it's all well and good, to expect that, like luck into somebody like Roisin, as I have lucked into, finding my Roisin, but we can all be the Roisin that we want to be in the world, right? Like, that's the thesis. We can all put in the time and effort to show up, because there is real power in numbers. And it really, even though it's amazing what one person can do, it's really, really powerful when you get a constellation of people who have very divergent skill sets together to all kind of tackle this shared community problem in their own way.
And even for that very complimentary thing, I didn't and can't and won't create a car counting algorithm or figure out how to make it easier for neighbors to complain to DOT, which really did make a difference. And we got out there and made our own data. And that isn't done, and actually that'll be coming. Josh referenced a data duel. We do have a data duel coming up. And that is when we are going to take our data and their data that they've collected and have a face-to-face meeting. Some of the methodologies, and we didn't get into this, some of the methodologies that they used to count pedestrians, they've done traffic studies and we've looked at the dates. And on multiple occasions, they've counted pedestrians, including school kids and vehicles, when DOE, Department of Education, is not in session. And then they said there are not enough school kids crossing the road during February break in July, during days like this. So we have our own data, thanks to Josh, that is impressive, presentable, backed by fact, documented, and we are going to say, you've told us that not enough people are crossing, not enough cars are crossing, your data is flawed, your data is not useful. You are relying on data to a point that you are focusing more on that than the truth, and it's not representative of that because of your collection methodologies.
So you can all get out there and make your own data too, and I hope that you do, because, ideally, when, once you kind of begin to collect some of that, that becomes data on the DOT site. They have a complaint kind of heat map that you can see on their site. Yeah. And what really stood out to me, right, is that is people in data. That's people data right there. These are all individual complaints in our neighborhood. And once that heat map moves from green to yellow to orange, that is when the DOT, the complaint-driven department, starts to pay attention. And that is when you may wake up one morning as we did and see a fresh coat of paint on your block, changing the traffic conditions on the street.
And just to orient you, the 87 is that intersection that Eric took it upon himself to really be the change leader on, which has since received traffic calming, which I think has really, probably that number has gone down quite a bit since then. And the 35 and 63 along Dorchester are the two main intersections that we've been referencing on this talk.
So really nothing in the world feels better than waking up one morning and seeing the crew out there making those changes. So I encourage y'all to, keep up the faith and put your toes out there and try to make the good stuff happen, because it really can make all the difference. So to follow Filippo's with a few resources that we've talked about, like the link to file a FOIL request, New York State's Freedom of Information Law, the open data portal for traffic collisions, which you can query and double check data on your own, finding a community board, as Roisin did, to potentially join, and of course writing the DOT commissioner yourself. So I hope folks take advantage of it, come back next year and report on your success, your frustrations, the in-progress work that you're going to keep chipping away at, and we'll celebrate that all together.
And maybe we'll have an update of using Josh's data that we presented some of it to you, and then seeing theirs, which has questionable or flawed techniques, and seeing what comes out on top when that turns together. So I'm actually very excited about this, because it's been years of work kind of culminating in actual conversation. So
When is that happening?
within the next month. And I think, too, it was spurred by us doing this talk. So thank you for everyone who attended, because I think us saying that we were going to be presenting our data, and this kind of led to, why don't you get your data and DOT gets your data and you can sit down and compare it. So we'll both be there, and we're thrilled about this data duel. We're probably a little more excited about it than they are, because I really feel like it's going to prevent something awful happening. I'm doing this work because I feel like someone's going to KSA on this street, and I can see that. I can just see it happening, and want to do everything we can possibly do to prevent that.
Yeah. Have y'all triggered a new study yet? Has that happened?
Yes, they've done the February study during February break. They redid that. Unfortunately, they redid it in July.
Oh, so the 2021 they've done now.
I think that's still
Our study.
because the studies are specific to each intersection. So the 2021 study was the intersection closer to where I live, and that one I think has not been reproduced yet. The Bayard Urban, I think there were studies last year, like you said, February and July studies that were done at that other intersection. That we've just foiled, and we've actually just got those PDFs as well to begin to. So what we're really going to do in advance of this. This data duel is basically take new video in the AM and PM rush hours at that intersection, cross-reference the data from that study, the 2024 study that we foiled, with what we see from our own results. And what I expect to see, is that it is dramatically unlikely that in one 60-minute period, like one school child or one senior crosses that street that happens to be right where a senior center is and right where a school is.
Where 100 seniors get a free lunch every day. Yeah. And one thing to note, too, is that because of the traffic calming measures put into place at the 87 mark, where you can no longer take a left from Cortelyou Road to Coney Island Avenue there, that's diverted a significant amount of traffic to the road that we've been advocating for, so that our community board, District Manager Sean Campbell, and our councilperson Rita Joseph has been advocating for that to prompt another traffic study because of the fundamental change.
Have you guys experienced any pushback from other members of the community against changing streets at all?
It is the only thing our whole community agrees on. Oh, wow. That Dorchester Road is a serious, like a fatality waiting to happen. There's literally no one who says we shouldn't have it there. It's been well publicized. The change.org/Dorchester has 538. It's publicized that if there were naysayers, there would have been ample opportunity for them to comment. It's truly the only thing that we all agree on. It's wild that there's not a dissenting voice besides the DOT saying that there aren't enough school kids crossing in July, and there aren't enough crashes when the NYPD is not counting crashes.
The only debate is really which one do you do first. That's maybe different opinions about which stop sign might be most important on that particular stretch, but no real dissent beyond that.
Yeah, either.
Was there any friction with the proposed bike lane?
No, they proposed that they be sharrows. Does anyone ever know what a sharrow is for a bike lane? It's just a lane marking.
Who's they? Sorry.
The DOT promised in 2022 and 2023 for implementation in 2023 or 2024 that there would be a sharrow lane, which is just white paint, so no green paint and no physical protection. And I'm not aware of any dissent. It's a pretty wide street, as we showed, so it wouldn't take away any parking or bike lanes or bus lanes, rather.
I think we are out of time.
Yep.
Everyone will wrap it there, but happy to keep chatting afterwards. And so grateful.
Well, to make the time.
Thank you so much. Good luck to your community. Thank you. This is useful. You're already out.
I have a lot of questions, but maybe we should talk not in this room because
Yeah, we'll get the next session set up, but you can.
oh wait, something like when you guys first filed your request to DOT, was it as a community board member or as like a private citizen? And then was the community board instrumental in helping push things forward?
So I'll just jump into that real quick. The numbers you see here are the number of individuals who put in their own requests. A lot of it was individual based, and the community board the community board said this is one of the top issues that people go to about them. So it's both.
Okay, interesting.
People contact the community board and they put in their own requests.
But then you guys individually did it yourself, not with the community board.
Both. Both.
Really both, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much like crafters individually, and then getting connected once we, I spent a little bit more time working on there. I like that approach.
The DFP portal's open to anyone here.
And how did you follow up after like the initial super vague response? Then you filed the FOIL. Did they ever get back to you? Like DOT, did you ever have like conversations with a specific individual, or was it like constantly different people cycling through being like,
So, in my case, the thing that got me a voicemail was having that middle envelope that I sent to the DOT,
Which contain all your studies.
like the homebrew traffic study with all the data to back that up. That dossier, which I also sent to the community board, was the thing that got attention, got a response. Any of the letters I'd written and the complaints that I'd made before that, some of them were actioned on in different ways at different times, but none of them yielded a response. From a representative at the DOT who was like, let me talk to you, a constituent, and try to move the conversation forward.
And from my perspective, our council person and the community board was that link that I would forward them the rejections. And I made a chart from my community of all the rejections that people got.
oh my God.
These are all made by different individuals, and sent this to the community board and was like, denied, denied. And so they were aware of this, and then they used it in their own work.